So today we're going to be talking about extended producer responsibility. So we've heard a lot of our clients asking questions about this. There's a mishmash from our understanding of different regulations at different state levels. Tell us a little bit more about what that is and what manufacturers are trying to navigate.
Yeah. Well, sorry, can you hear me all right? Extended producer responsibility laws are really changing, so is there feedback? Sorry if that's awful. I'll try and...
I think they want you to be right close to your
close. All right, got it. Extended producer responsibility laws traditionally are really end-of-life laws that impose additional restrictions on producers, basically to manage, the hazardous materials on the back end. And so there are a bunch of examples you've probably been subject to a lot of your life and not realized it. So tires, car batteries are great examples, right? You can't send your car battery to a landfill. Tires don't go to landfills. You usually pay a service charge when you replace a vehicle. Those are sort of the classic examples. But if you were to run down, there's a long list. Batteries, carpet, electronics, household hazardous waste, junk mail, lighting, mattresses, mercury, motor oil, paint, packaging, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, radioactive devices, refrigerants, solar panels, probably near and dear to a lot of folks in this room, textiles, and tires. So that's kind of the gamut of sort of the traditional list. It's really changing in recent years, so most of the laws are geared on the back end where some of those materials are banned from landfills or they're uniform, some of them would be uniform hazardous waste like light ballast for fluorescent lights. And so they get managed or they impose a restriction on disposal, so folks the legal effect is that you have to deal with those in a different way anyway. Now a lot of states have come, California and Oregon and Washington are sort of the leaders in the clubhouse in that field. Prop 65, some of you might be familiar with, has been around for over a decade now, and that really requires the warning labels that you see on all materials on pretty much any consumer product that says this product contains material that contains hazardous substances that may cause cancer or reproductive health. And the list of materials that are covered in those is so broad that it's almost everything. And so that's a California specific law, and I guess an important note here would be that there's really a changing landscape because it's a California law, but it applies everywhere, because if a product makes its way into California, it's got to have that notice on it. If it doesn't, you're in violation. Doesn't matter whether you sold it there. If it makes its way into commerce in California, you have a Prop 65 problem. And there's a pretty healthy bar there that enforces that. And so that's why if you're in Michigan, you'll see those same warnings on products in Michigan. And so now what you're seeing is there are a lot of bans, and I think of them, they're not traditional extended producer responsibility laws, but some states have started banning PFAS by way of example, or PFAS will be banned in packaging, or there are limits on packaging. And those have the effect, so it doesn't matter if Illinois has banned, if Illinois banned PFAS tomorrow, it would end up applying in Michigan, because Michigan, it's hard to keep Michigan products from making their way into commerce in Illinois. And so manufacturers are struggling to adapt to that. And if you were to look online at extended producer responsibility laws, there are a few websites. The map of all the different state laws and all the different products that are either banned or have kind of specific requirements in different states is daunting. And so if you're a manufacturer and you're concerned about sustainability and really complying with all those different state laws, it's a challenge. And
keep going. You're doing, that's fantastic information. I mean, I can only imagine the manufacturers trying to navigate that landscape. And you're talking about a lot of different states. Are there certain states that have enacted this regulation already around an extended producer responsibility, or proposing to enact it?
Yeah, if you were to look at the map, there are really only 6 or 7 states. You can think of them as, I think Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Wyoming. They don't tend to have anything like that. Pretty much every other state has them, but the heavy hitters are really California, Colorado, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New York, Washington, Vermont. They all of those states probably have half a dozen or more extended producer responsibility laws that they're applying, and they're pretty aggressive about it.
So as a manufacturer, no matter if your product's manufactured in one state, as long as it's being produced and then ends up in use in a different state or being sold in that state, then they'd have to comply with these regulations?
The triggers are different.
Okay.
So you have state laws. Every state legislature's approached it a little bit differently. So some states, I want to say it's Iowa maybe, no intentionally added PFAS. And so a product that's manufactured in Iowa can't have intentionally added PFAS. But when they say intentionally added, that's because you could have some in your water supply. So,
oh, wow.
If you were bottling juice and you had a little bit of PFAS in your water supply, that wouldn't be intentionally added. So I'm going off on a tangent, but every state and every law is, they're all little silos, and that's one of the things that's making it challenging, because traditionally those were, the federal government was regulating interstate transport, and now a lot of the state-specific laws that are applying are really hard for manufacturers to track, because you're trying to comply with standards in 50 states, wherever your product might end up.
Wow, what a complex challenge that manufacturers are facing under this new regulatory landscape. And another regulation that we've been hearing about as well, you mentioned, the California Prop 65 and PFAS there. We're hearing TSCA's now regulating, so this is at the federal level, regulating PFAS as well. So that's a new regulation that we're understanding manufacturers are trying to comply with as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so in theory, TSCA's Toxic Substances Control Act, and so that's a federal statute that generally regulates new chemicals that get. So in theory, if you were Dow and you developed a new, a new waterproofing agent, a new detergent, had a new chemical in it, TSCA has a process for registering new chemicals and making sure that they're safe. And so that's been on the books for a long time. 3M in particular got in trouble for ignoring that process for PFAS, which is part of the reason we're in the scenario that we're in now, with PFAS being in a lot of things. It never went through the registration process. But TSCA now has a PFAS-specific reporting requirement, so manufacturers who either produce PFAS, or if you import PFAS in a product, including PFAS that might already be in products that are imported from another country, there's an annual reporting requirement that's taking effect, and so that reporting requirement's triggering. That's the regulation you hear about under TSCA. It's really reporting regulation. It's not banning it. It's not really end of life yet.
Okay.
But I think the clear focus is, EPA wants everyone to report it, because within a couple of years, am I going wrong?
No, you're going fine. Just the mic a little.
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
The clear direction here, right? PFAS is either, if you were to go back 20 years, PCBs first were subject to additional regulation and then they were banned. Asbestos was subject to additional regulation and then it was banned. It's back in products again. People don't know that, but there was a sunset on a lot of that regulation. But PFAS is kind of going in that. PFAS is going in that direction, right? And so I think the clear impetus is that they're looking at opportunities to require folks to report, and once everyone's reported, then they're going to figure out where it is, and then they're going to start trying to ban PFAS use at an individual level. If I were to get out my crystal ball. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of work trying to go back. How far do companies have to go back to gather that reporting data?
Well, it's on an annual reporting basis, and it's just starting now, so
okay.
It won't be. It's not retroactive.
Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's at the federal level, and then there's a state level regulation. Is it just California Prop 65, or is there other states as well?
Well, a number of states, and I just timed out I can tell you my notes, yeah. So a lot of states have bans or limited PFAS bans already. So
Okay.
those are the state rules. So, California, Maine, New York, Minnesota, Washington have banned or limited that, and usually they're specific. So some states have banned use in cosmetics, others in textile. Some will say you can't use it it can't be intentionally added in a product that's produced in that state. And so again, you kind of have to, if you have PFAS in your supply chain, you kind of need to look at, so if I were a cosmetics manufacturer, by way of example, then you need to go figure out which states have banned PFAS in cosmetics, and you either can't sell to those states or need to find, a workaround. And that's happening all the time. The current administration is trying to find a way to preempt all that by preempt the state laws. They don't like, the state-by-state regulation. It really is inefficient, but, it's the federal government's not regulating any further right now, so.
Right.
It's kind of the current status. It's nebulous.
The state is, at the state level, it's challenging because you've got 50 states electing to implement their regulation, which makes sense for their state, but not necessarily consistently across all 50.
Correct.
What a challenging environment. Oh, so what tips do you have for manufacturers? And I will let you have this one.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I'll trade you.
And now sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
Staying in pages. So, I guess, the most important thing is, it depends on your industry, it's compliance tracking, right? So, as you might imagine, there are some laws that are universal. So, by way of example, for PFAS, if there's a PFAS ban in your state and you can't manufacture with that applies to everyone. But by way of example, cosmetics has been singled out. So if you're a cosmetics manufacturer, you'd be tracking the cosmetic specific rules. So, there are a lot of industry groups that are helping folks track what's going on. So, I think compliance tracking and just knowing what laws are out there in the different states, if you're manufacturing and you're in that world, is got to be the starting point. There's really no way around that. Evaluating the supply chain. So, if I were making non-stick cooking pans right now, I'd be finding a way to not use PFAS anymore, or I'd be finding can I get, and the same thing is true. So for TSCA reporting, one way to avoid the TSCA reporting requirement is to not have PFAS in your products. So get certifications from your suppliers that there's no PFAS in the product they're supplying you. If you've got coatings or waterproofings, try and get rid of them, try and find a substitute. It's coming. It might not be for a couple of years, but eventually, and really regardless of whether you have, regardless of whether there's an official ban, there are plenty of personal injury suits and class actions attacking manufacturers of cookware, cosmetics that have PFAS in them. This isn't necessarily specific to PFAS, but it's kind of the hot topic of the day. So I think there's a good, identifying potential liabilities is sort of a key, it's not, like I said, it's not just compliance and enforcement, it's the potential lawsuits that are coming from manufacturers. And then I guess, if you do have hazardous materials, prepare for demand letters. That's happened all the time. A lot of states have specific laws. I would tell you, there's some obscure state laws out there. By way of example, Georgia has a restriction on what you can call honey and how it's produced. So there are manufacturers who would never be aware of that, sell honey into Georgia and get demand letters from local attorneys saying, you can't call that honey here.
Oh my goodness.
And so demand letters, as more of those state laws pop up, you see more private enforcement going on, more lawsuits from manufacturers in those states who are complying, saying you're selling a non-compliant product. And so I guess that goes along with compliance tracking, but having a plan in place when those letters come in and and the push comes. And then lastly, I guess the
think long and hard about insurance. I don't know if we have any insurance folks in the room, but you know, I'm always shocked at the gap in coverage between what most manufacturers think is covered by their policies and what actually is covered. There are a lot of exclusions written in. A lot of insurers are writing PFAS-specific exclusions in to product liability coverage. So if you have that, you know, they're not going to tell you that, but if you read if you get into your rider, that's an issue. And you know, I think that's even when you have product liability coverage for most products, that usually means someone gets injured by using your product. It generally doesn't cover you if it gets banned in another state and you had to go back and get that product. So, you know, it's a lot to think about. I guess across the board, it changes literally week by week. New states are passing new extended producer responsibility laws all the time, and it's a challenge for the regulated community to keep up with that.
Well, it sounds like there's an interesting dynamic between the manufacturer and then trying to get this information out of the supply chain. And if you don't mind me making a shameless plug for Foresight, it sounds like we have an opportunity there, as a purveyor of data and trying to collect data throughout the supply chain for our customers. That sounds like there's a big opportunity in this space to help those manufacturers try and identify that PFAS.
Yeah.
And other types of materials as well in the supply chain.
Absolutely. I think not only would that help you get around TSCA reporting, but in all honesty, you're starting to see PFAS-free. I don't know if anyone's seen that. Mm-hmm. There's PFAS-free labeling now, so it's a marketing tactic and that a lot of companies are taking on, especially in the food processing world. So, yeah, I think if you've got the ability to track that and to rule it out, I think it's a good first step.
Well, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate you sharing your information and all this new regulation that we're starting to experience as manufacturers of products.
Nice, thanks, Matt.